Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. Ana Fernandez, family law attorney, and we're continuing with our videos in changes of the law here in Florida as of July 1st. Lots of changes have happened in the laws specifically to family law. We've talked about the permanent alimony is no longer, you can no longer request that. There's also changes in paternity rights and giving fathers of unmarried fathers rights to children. But in this video, we're gonna focus on new changes in the law with respect to domestic violence cases. Now, of course, there's domestic violence cases that are in criminal court, and then there's domestic violence cases that you can open up in family courts. For purposes of this video, I'm gonna focus on the DV cases that have to do with family court. So in 2021, it's a very sad story. There was a mom, she goes to court, she requests an injunction, a permanent domestic violence injunction on behalf of her son, Greyson. Unfortunately, the threats that came from the father were directed to the mother. And at the time, so prior to July 1st of this year, 2023, before, in order to get an injunction in family court, you had to show that there was imminent fear or reasonable fear of imminent harm or death caused to yourself, and then if you were filing it on behalf of your child, that harm would in essence be done to the child. So because mom had, these were terrible text messages that the dad was sending her, saying that he was gonna decapitate her, violence directed at her, because the law at that time reflected that a domestic violence injunction could only be granted if there was reasonable fear of imminent harm to yourself. And in this case, she was seeking to protect her son. They had to deny it because the law at that time, it didn't recognize a nexus between having harm to one parent, how that would in essence harm the child as well. If you think about it logically, it makes sense, because first of all, a parent really wanted to hurt the other parent, what better way of doing so than hurting the child? It's sick, it's sad, and that's exactly why this law changed. Unfortunately, in Broward, where the mom went to go get a temporary or a permanent injunction for domestic violence, they denied it, and a few days later, dad shoots Greyson, kills him, and shoots himself. It was a murder-suicide. So now we have this law in effect. It's called the Greyson's Law, and it now changes the law that allows, if you fear, let's say your spouse tells you terrible things, verbally assaults you, physically assaults you, and you're ready to go and get an injunction. And you also have to remember, you don't always have to call the police. You can, and that would open up a criminal case. The benefit of doing it in family cases, so you can get a permanent injunction. So let's go back to the hypothetical. Let's say your spouse is verbally and physically threatening you. The law has now changed to say, instead of it applying to the person that, as they have a reasonable fear of imminent harm or death, it now applies to reasonable fear of imminent harm or death to a parent or a child. It could be the child, it could be the parent, it could be either or. But now with that language, it extends the protection for the minor children. Why? Because it is in the best interest of the minor child to take this into consideration. And now other changes, in addition to that, they've added more language to give the court not just discretion, but actually requiring the court to consider acts of domestic violence when determining shared parental responsibility, which is shared parental responsibility is making the big choices in the kids' lives, like what doctors they're going to go to, what schools they're going to go to, and that is actually very difficult to take away from a parent. But in circumstances like this, even if it's temporarily, courts now have the ability to do so. This is another big change. I think it's a great one. It extends protection. I do anticipate, again, we don't really know how it's going to work out 100% because we have the law, then we have courts and the court system. And judges, they interpret the law. So yes, of course they have to follow it to the T, but at the end of the day, they interpret it. And the only way we get to know how they're interpreting it is usually if a case gets to, let's say you're not practicing attorney. Obviously, if I go before the judges and I have experience, but for anybody else that wants to actually see how are they implementing these laws, typically we have to wait until there's an appeal. And when there's an appeal, if new cases like this, new law like this, I anticipate them, the third DCA, which is the Court of Appeals, at least in Miami-Dade, I anticipate them issuing opinions, because that's pretty much laying the foundation and the interpretation in writing. Instead of having someone like me that's kind of interpreting and explaining what it is, you can actually see it through examples and in process. So if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas or new things that are happening with respect to family law cases or any cases or laws here in Florida, reach out, let us know. We actively work on videos like this one to help the community and help people that are seeking this information. Thank you very much.